Every year I sit down with the Flavorman and Moonshine University teams and discuss the beverage trends for the upcoming year. This year I was joined by our COO, Scott Weddle, Kristen Wemmer, our Director of Technical Services, Director and Flavor Architect Tom Gibson, and Colin Blake, Director of Spirits Education at Moonshine University. Here's what they had to say about the 2022 beverage trends.
So a big trend that we're seeing is in bold flavors, so tropicals and things that are more flavorful than the classic lemon lime, cherry, mango variety pack that we're used to seeing in the past. People want unique flavors and ones that really stand out from the rest. Tom, you've made a ton of flavors over the past year.
That we have.
What do you see trending into next year?
I think it's a lot more of the familiar, back to flavors that people have seen before. But when you say bold, big flavors that jump out are like watermelon, similar flavors like cherry, not lemon lime. I'm trying to think of some other ones. Basic strawberry, apple, those types of things.
Yeah, it's kind of the blend of, where COVID drove us, right? Everybody wants the comfort food, right? So all those traditional, at ease flavors, but everybody also started baking and cooking because they're stuck at home. So now they also want adventurous as well. So we're seeing that kind of trend of the historic, old cozies and the bold new adventure.
It never went away. You're always mixing familiar with something new. It might be strawberry goji berry or strawberry dragon fruit, but it really has gone back to just normal flavors.
I think a big part of it has been sort of the saturation of the seltzers. Those weren't initially considered big, bold flavors in the seltzer market especially. And people have over time started to try to differentiate in some way, and that's certainly one way they've been able to do it. And then that's, naturally bleeding over into other categories and trying to reach other types of drinkers. And you mentioned COVID. One thing, COVID has affected some people's sense of taste and smell.
So it needs to be bolder.
It needs to be bolder sometimes. And, it also has just, affected the way they interact with the world in general. So that's something that can't be discounted when you think of how the trends are changing.
Yeah, I think that's true, too, because it's you see those flavors that are familiar coming back. Sometimes it's just increased flavor. Sometimes it's increased flavor with a higher amount of acid, but I think it's really looking for true to fruit, right? It really has to taste like a watermelon, not like maybe a Jolly Rancher, so they really want something that is familiar.
And maybe if you're going to be stuck at home for months, you want something that's in the fridge that is relatable, that you know what you're getting. You're maybe not going to roll the dice on something totally wild and off the wall. So.
Well, spirit sales during COVID fully reflected that, all the craft, they maintained, but they didn't see the growth they did. What huge growth, or huge spikes were the old classics, like Bushmills and Jack Daniels, and we know what we're getting. We're stuck at home. Let's make sure we're stuck with something good there. But the bold flavors is something that we're seeing on the spirit side at Moonshine University too, because yes, we're seeing a lot of the old traditionals, the fan favorites, but we're also seeing a huge surge in development and interest as far as Amari and really big, bold experimental gins, which are these kind of, very traditional type of spirits, and were used a lot in the advent of cocktail culture, but they're huge resurgence now. We're seeing more and more people even experiment with those things at home.
Yeah, that comes our way too through Kristen's team. So we're seeing a lot more of we've seen this for the past couple of years. The florals, we keep saying florals, but then to the gentians, the anise, those types of florals. Lavender. What are some of the other ones that we see?
More herbal, like juniper, and different.
Yeah, we've said bitter, but it's also bitter and then complex with those florals, with those roots, earthy notes that come along with it.
What about acidic? Are you guys seeing more people push towards more
acetic acid?
Yeah, well, but just because a big thing in cocktail, so much of what we see early as a driver over at Moonshine University is really based off of what's happening in cocktails, and with the shrub explosion and everybody's making shrubs and getting into shrubs. Again, I think it's a lot of people stuck at home with distilled white vinegar and some stuff about to go bad, so they make a shrub to make a cocktail out of. But we are seeing not only more bitter, we're seeing more people push towards those kind of acidic type of flavor profiles. Is that
Well,
something that
I
you're
think
seeing?
on the flavor profile side, that leans more towards tropicals like passion fruits or guavas that have a high acid content, and those lend well to that. I don't know if I would say like something that's acetic acid driven.
Yeah, the problem with that is almost everything we're doing is going into cans, and cans have a limit on the amount of acid and the acidity that you can have in them without corroding. So that's definitely a fine line we have to navigate.
Well, how much are you seeing trends change because of packaging, like just the short-term packaging challenges? Are you already seeing people just being like, well, we did want to do like an RTD, but we can't get cans. So what can we serve in the palm of someone's hand?
Yeah, no, I think that's an interesting thing to think about. You know, what actually, not just what are the trends, but what else is driving them, and that's interesting to me about the cans in particular, because I think there are two things. Yeah, there are people that want to do a certain thing, and then they realize they're limited by the packaging that they want to be in, and have to be something different.
Yeah.
And then there are other people that it's almost driven by that packaging. You know, we've seen such a decline in interest in things like plastic or PET bottles.
Sure.
They're seen as less sustainable and creating more trash. So some people come to the table with the first thing in mind is I've got to be in an aluminum can. So that drives some of the flavor choices as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And limits ingredients, not only acid but salt. So a lot of people are wanting salt in like a margarita. Well, a margarita can't have any salt in it, or else it'll leak on the shelf.
And it's interesting because we're seeing more and more salt inclusion on our side too, because with a lot of the newer kind of Western style gin developments, we're seeing people come in who like are bringing in like pink Himalayan salt and other things that they want in a gin profile that are working out really well, but not something
Similar to that, just a premiumization in all the RTD cocktails that we're making. People want something that's kind of more than a White Claw. They want the cocktail experience that they would have at a bar. So people are asking about things like salt and bitters and things like that aren't typical to a normal.
And that doesn't, so from that perspective, it doesn't play into a flavor profile, but we have salt enhancing flavors that we work on, or bitter enhancing, or those types of things. So it's those background flavors that aren't really a profile. Mm-hmm. It's just something that plays on that, trying to mimic that effect in finished beverage.
Yeah. And then with the RTDs that you all are doing, are you also seeing that kind of split between people doing both a traditional drive of those traditional cocktails and also just like really bold out there innovation?
Yeah, for a while, I think similar to what we were talking about before, it was only familiar cocktails. We're starting to see more people get into the more creative, bartender created cocktails now, and which is really fun for us to work on because we get to be creative as well. Yeah, so I think health means something different to a lot of people. I mean, you see all these different trendy diets, and some of them really like fat, and some of them don't want to eat any fat at all. So health means something different to everybody. A lot of what we're seeing is more clean label driven. So people don't want all of the sodium benzoate, potassium sorbate, artificial preservatives, artificial sweeteners on their label. They want as simple as possible. If they could just have a product that's labeled water, sugar, flavor, that's kind of the ideal. So we're seeing a lot of that seen as healthy. So we're kind of meeting in the middle on, does healthy mean simple label, or does healthy mean low calorie, or what does it actually mean to you?
Comment on how many customers want to go into specific food chain or markets just because of that exact point, right? Mm-hmm. They want to go into Whole Foods, they want to go into Trader Joe's. How many projects do you have that are just driven towards going after a chain?
Yeah, and I'd say most are, and when we talk about developing something for natural positioning, we use Whole Foods Market as our standard because they kind of set the industry standard for what's allowed in a natural product since it's not defined otherwise.
Yeah. And that's new for us too, because, non-GMO flavors. It's not now non-GMO, it's GMO free, or it's non-GMO project verified. And so for a flavor, that's, we have to chase a lot of paperwork to do that, but it's because it's health conscious and people want the label to drive them into that category.
Yeah, one way we hear it from brand owners is that that consumers want to be able to understand their product. They want to see it as simple and fitting into their specific lifestyle. And I think the flavor a lot of times plays a big part of that as well, just as much as anything else that might be functional or active about the beverage. And again, like you said, fitting into certain food markets and industry trends and things. But authenticity, simplicity, simple, clean labels. That's one that's been a trend for a while, and I think continues.
It's not going away.
It's not, and it's also so built into the advertising, the marketing, and the brand story, right? Because that is such a part of what you're building on. Because no one is just making a beverage, right? You're building a lifestyle. You're generating, an image that people buy into with your beverage, which is why those types of things are such a big part of brand story and building a brand.
And that starts from ground up, from the ingredients that we're using, making the flavors and making the beverage, and how they can use that to market to the consumers, for sure.
Yeah, and over at Moon U, we see that really driving a lot of decisions as far as like what ingredients, how to build a brand, how to tell the story, because that's the one thing that every person who launches a beverage has to have a unique story, and we have seen next door those stories change a good deal over time, because it used to, when we opened our doors over there a decade ago, it was, you could just say grain to glass and everyone's like, all right, I don't know what that means, but that sounds great, and no one cares anymore. Right, like you actually have to have like
a story behind it.
A story, and whether that's that bought adopted story that we're seeing from brands, or people who are just genuinely good at being authentic, of just like, I love this category, so I went out and found the best I could and bring it out to the market. So it's just interesting how there's so much driving the brand and story and image of beverage these days.
So many times Kristen and her team gets asked, hey, how can we brand this? And it really comes down to the flavor, what's in the flavor. So it's not just an orange flavor. It has to be orange oil that came from Tarraco, or it has to be Sicilian, or it has to have some label claim, and you can build a label based on that. And so we're going back to our suppliers, who are sometimes farmers and essential oil manufacturers. What the hell are you talking about? But it really means, and so they're starting to get it too. And it's, from my standpoint, it's odd that we'd have to build a label claim behind a flavor, but you're building ingredients into the flavor just for that.
Well, and it's because they're eliminating them in every other step. If they could incorporate marketing just because of the flavor in a seltzer, just water and flavor, then that's
there has to be
how
something
they differentiate themselves.
Yeah, that's true.
We're also seeing a lot of people just in the past, if you wanted something low calorie, it would be, and naturally positioned, you would use stevia or monk fruit and erythritol, and those just still aren't super widely accepted, don't necessarily taste great, and so people are just eliminating sweeteners altogether. And same with colors, since naturally positioned colors kind of fade and aren't super stable, we're seeing them completely eliminate colors from their products as well.
Yeah, so for the sweetness, that's a huge market for the flavor side. It's kind of a non-volatile, and it's not a flavor profile, but it's mimicking what sweetness is to someone.
Yeah.
Whether that's cotton candy-ish, whether that's sugar floss, and you kind of recreate a flavor based on that. It tastes like nothing, but it like gives perceived sweetness. So we can build those into beverages.
Yeah.
So
interesting.
Yeah. So it gets a little bit meta, but one thing I think is interesting is, we've been on the forefront of flavor for 30 years now, and we've been talking about flavor trends for a long, long time. And even that landscape has changed, because when you're talking about flavor trends 30 years ago, you've got the national retail grocery stores, you've got these a very limited number of places that are going to be selling these products. So everything there has to appeal to an enormous audience. And now you've got all these different channels from, boutique grocery
Pockets,
stores,
yeah.
different pockets, geographical considerations, online retailers,
Yeah.
direct to consumer. It's almost the same as what you've seen in the music industry. You can say that, 30 years ago there were these types of music. And now if you say, what kind of music do you listen to? You might hear 50 different things, things you've never heard of.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same way in flavor. So,
And it's great that people can actually service such like a specific need and profile and do so well.
Yeah.
Mango used to, and did you ever hear of mango flavor? And now it's like, Generation Z's favorite flavor. So
It's the world's largest selling flavor.
Yeah.
Mango, and it's all varietal too. It's Alfonso for the East, and Nam Doc Mai for it's very specialized.
yeah.
So we could have saved a lot of time. And they said, what are the flavor trends? They just said mango and called it.
Meeting over.
This would have been no editing required in that video.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about flavor trends. There's also just sort of general beverage trends. And, one of my favorite words that I learned in 2019, 20, 21 has been the sober curious trend. And that is absolutely has driven a lot of innovation in low alcohol and no alcohol offerings. But there are people that continue to want to participate in the cocktail culture. They want to be able to celebrate with their friends, and that has definitely driven. In some ways, we've taken traditional cocktail formulations and maybe make them lower alcohol by using a wine base instead of a spirit base.
Yeah.
And that drives some of the flavors as well. There's certain things where you're going to be able to get away with that a lot easier than other concepts where it'd be a lot tougher. And then the no alcohol space, everything from just really exotic, complicated, layered profiles that create the same sort of experience that a cocktail would, but then also these non-alcoholic beverages that really try to completely approximate the experience of spirits.
The challenge is people think it's just off flavor, but really when you're looking at real spirits, you're looking at tens, hundreds of thousands of flavors. So not only is it, all the different flavors, then you're looking at mouthfeel and physical effect and all those other
Scott has alluded to it. It's like a puzzle. You're trying to put together all those pieces to the puzzle, not just the flavor, but the non-volatiles that are the burning, the stinging, the mouthfeel, the oak, along with everything else. It's not an easy task to accomplish, but it's interesting, and I think there's a lot of room in the category for specific non-alcoholic knockoffs where you're trying to mimic a brand, a specific type of whiskey or a specific type of gin, because each is different. Think of all the botanicals.
So many
that go, right?
Yeah.
So from a flavor perspective, the iterations are endless.
Yeah, and really they should all just be trained to do spiced rums. They're the easiest to emulate, right?
That's true. Vanilla and cinnamon, we're done.
What about a vodka flavor?
We'll pass. No, we have that too, actually. Kristen's used it often. Yeah.
Wait, really? You all have a vodka flavor?
Yeah.
Jump back. Seriously?
It's the cleanest flavor I've ever made.
What's that? Is this bottle empty? That's crazy.
Good.
That's awesome.
There's a lot to look forward to in 2022 for the beverage industry. Big and bold flavors are going to be featured across both alcohol and non-alcohol drinks, either as one-note flavors or as more indulgent experiences. Consumer interest in easy-to-understand ingredient statements are going to continue to drive for simplicity and authenticity among beverage brands. And we expect to see more development in the low and no alcohol space. One thing we know for sure is that Flavorman will continue to change what the world is drinking. So please visit our website, flavorman.com, to learn more. And thanks for watching.